slides, and I'm borrowing from the SLC slides, and I've extended on the team. So tonight, for the mission moment, I want to talk a bit about college and career. And so last Wednesday, Melissa and I touted that we had our in-person college fair back in the scene with a host of kids taking part and meeting various college representatives, et cetera. It was a good event, very similar to what we did in 2019, albeit with masks and perhaps some other safety measures in place, but a good event. I want to extend on that tonight to talk a bit about, I guess we're in year 9 as a school, and we've graduated 2 cohorts. So we've got some information on just like how things seem to be trending and going very early in this adventure. So I wanted to share out a couple of points that I think are familiar to you, but are worth bringing back, as well as some new ones. So here we are, and I'm going to just move this on over this way and move this on down. So I've got four tables related to college and career, where the first sort of step toward college and career is high school graduation. And so what you see here in this table are just some of the stats with regard to where we've been the last 2 years with high school graduation. And so with our first cohort, we experienced a high school graduation rate of 98%. For students with disabilities, that percentage was 96%. This past year with the class of 2021, we had a graduation rate of 98%. For students with IEPs, it was 100%. I don't have class of 2021 New York City numbers, but comparatively, that is favorable to what we saw in 2020 overall in the city, with a graduation rate of 79% for all kids and 53% for students with disabilities. So on the mark of kids earning their diploma and then having doors open to them that require a diploma, we're doing significantly better than the average school in New York City. So that's one, and this is on a common measure. There's no way to sort of like change up the requirements from one school to the other in New York State. Same requirements overall among public schools. So beyond that, we next look at college matriculation, and you haven't seen this data up to date in this way. And so we've got 2 cohorts, the class of 2020 and the class of 2021. As of September of the year following each of these cohorts' graduation, so September of 2020 for the class of 2020, the college matriculation rate was 79%. For the class of 2021, as of last month, it was 73%. Versus the city, and I'm going back to a research paper that came out in 2018 from a group from NYU. The paper is actually sourced here. This is the best data I have, and so while it's not apples to apples in the same year, it's comparable. For the class of 2018 in New York City overall, the college matriculation rate was 58%. And for students who are economically disadvantaged, that rate was 53%. So on this sort of measure, looking at these 2 data points, there's a good story to be told about kids matriculating from Unity on to college immediately following graduation. The researchers here attribute a lot of like the growth in college matriculation over the past 15 years in New York City, 20 years in New York City, to like more kids graduating from high school. And so the trend in New York City overall has been from 2000 to 2020, there's been a pretty significant increase in high school graduation from about 50-something% to just shy of 80% now. Again, they attribute that to, if you earn a diploma, you now have a door open to matriculate in college. And so I think what we've experienced is some of the same thing. Kids graduate from high school, more doors open to them, more kids matriculating to college. We've got a pretty good academic and CCR team to sort of help guide them through this process. So this is promising. Are there any questions here thus far before moving on to persistence in college? Cool, let's go there then. So now we're looking at kids persisting through school, and we can only look at the class of 2020 because they now have potentially experienced 2 years of college. Class 2021 is not. So here, the percentage of students enrolled in college who graduated from Unity as of September in their second year, that's this year, is 63%. Going back to that original paper for the class of 2015, where they then fast forwarded and looked at how many of those kids persisted in college 2 years out, that number was 39%. So pretty hefty differential there too. Proud of that. So we have more kids who, as of now, and it's still not the end of their second year, so it's early, and they're just beginning their second year. As of now, if we hold on this, and a vast majority of these kids continue to persist through their second year of college, there's a good story to tell with regard to what our kids are experiencing and achieving post-graduation from Unity. Here's Trudy, and we're talking about her son's cohort. So are there any questions there? This is interesting stuff. And what I'd like to do is like push this a little bit if you've got some questions about ways in which this could be interpreted differently, or perhaps ways in which this could be more compelling for y'all.
Well, my one question is, do we know what happens to the ones who dropped out after a year? Like,
for our students, for kids at Unity, yes.
Is it mostly COVID driven, or is it what do we think is happening there? And presumably we want to help them stay in once they're enrolled.
Yeah, I'll have that data for you next month. It's there, and I just began looking at it after getting school up and right over the past month and a half. But I do have that data. I'll report out next month. I think there are many stories to tell. Anecdotally, I saw a graduate in the deli yesterday who did not pursue college after graduating in 2020. She's now looking to go back. She's working full-time at Starbucks, may go to ASU, which has a scholarship program with Starbucks, or may go back to school in person because she has ambitions of playing basketball in college and could. So that's one story. But she was working at a grocery store just after 2020 during kind of COVID heavy times. Another student I saw outside today, he's now working at Amazon full-time. He's got music kind of on his mind too, and is interested in perhaps working with kids. So he stopped by to see if perhaps we have something available to him, and we might with some after-school stuff. So some different stories across the board. And so I think you make a good point though, Marion, in that like even in 2020, we're talking about a time which is atypical with regard to COVID, and the numbers on average probably being lower across the country and city with college going than what we might have seen in 2019.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else that folks would want to point out, ask, before moving on to what this means and what it could mean for kids? So in our charter, if you were to research it and go back to 2011, there's like us describing kind of our vision for school and mission for school, where like that word empowerment comes up a great many times in our application. And then what it means is not just kids graduating from high school or passing some tests, but overall like experiencing learning moments where they're acquiring new skills, new experiences, exposures, confidence, all that, so that they're able to and have doors open to attending college, persisting through college, and then going into a career that they find fulfilling. And so persistence means something here. And so you may have seen data like this before, but this is coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it just offers this table here, differing levels of weekly earnings, the median of that, according to different levels of completed education. And so for the typical student not earning a high school diploma, and again, we're talking about 20% of the student population in New York City, just over that, weekly earnings on average or at median are about $619. That versus a child with some college, $877. There's a big difference in what kids are bringing home and able to provide for themselves and their families with. So this is meaningful over not just 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but over a lifetime. So what we're seeing here is some promising signs about what our kids are experiencing post high school, where certainly there's a lot of work to do. What we want is for even more doors to be open to our kids, and when they step in, even greater levels of persistence when they go to school. But I think we're in the game. And so I find this intriguing and inspiring, and look forward to more forward movement with this sort of analysis and what it provides for us, and helping us get better about what kids are experiencing 6-12 as well. So that is the mission moment for this evening. Jim, I thought we'd have one question coming you. Something there. What do you got?
No, I mean, this is all, yeah. Look, it's so hard given what we've been through the last year to understand, what this all means, and looking at the, a couple of years ago data and trying to go apples to apples, but it makes sense. And this all makes sense. I sort of say, hey, let's see what happens here with this cohort that just graduated. Hopefully, do you have a sense of why our folks leave college once they're in? Do you have a sense of, is it frustration? Is it just typical, hey, I wanted to go on and get a job somewhere? Is it my concern, any of our concern would be that they weren't prepared adequately? Do you get that kind of feedback from people as you talk to them?
I think I'll speak a little bit out of turn here, in that I think there's probably some kind of better data out there, and then there's kind of our kids, and I haven't looked at that database as of yet, but from what I recall, finances are huge, like money, like that's why kids end up not continuing, and so that, and then I think I would surmise the second reason would be struggles, perhaps because of academics, or perhaps because of things in personal lives.
And those who leave for financial reasons, are they getting jobs? Not a bad outcome if they land a job.
Yeah, so I've got that data too. About 63% of our kids, I said, are still in college, of that founding cohort. And then I want to say about another 30% are working full-time right now. And then beyond that,
Okay.
about 10% of our kids who aren't employed and aren't in school, and we have kind of our radar there on those students. And right now, we are in contact with about 75%, 80% of our founding cohort. So there are some students who we haven't maintained contact with for various reasons. And so this pool of students I'm referring to from the class of 2020 is about, it's the vast majority of our kids, about 80%, but not everyone.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sure thing. All right. I think the other thing you guys are going to experience here is you're going to be tired of my voice in like 25 minutes. There's just a lot to report out, and it's kind of heavy at the front of this meeting. So apologies in advance. And so look to chime in so you're not hearing my voice consistently so often. So Jim, you want to jump into head of school report?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. I'm gonna open that up too. I think I have that as a PDF here. Bear with me. If you have that open too, it might be easiest for you just to follow it on your screen. Hey, Jeanette, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing okay, thanks. So, all right, here we are. Too many tabs. So there are a number of updates I want to provide here, just coming out of this month, because it's been, as I mentioned in my report, an eventful month. So I think overall the story here is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So forward progress being made in a number of fronts, including safety and protocols, including staffing, academically, some good gains moving forward, and extracurricularly. At the same time, COVID is still pretty real. And so we have faced some challenges regarding quarantining and how to sort of like switch on and switch off that. Enrollment, we're about 12 down from where we'd like to be, and we still have a couple of key vacancies there. So those are the challenges that we're wrestling through as a team. In terms of updates specifically, I'm going to jump to headlines, which I talked to you in detail with the SLC on Wednesday, but a couple of underlining notes here. So first, about 32% of our students are confirmed as vaccinated now. We'll look at some data in a little while to show sort of like the exact numbers by grade, but there's been an uptick there over the past few weeks because of there being more interest, and then also because we've had a couple of positive cases in which, if you're not vaccinated, kids are required to quarantine for a longer period of time, and so families are giving that another look, and more kids are then getting vaccinated, perhaps because of that. So that's been the general trend over the past month, some increases in the percentage of kids who are vaccinated. Moving on down to staffing, we made 6 hires. This was the past 10 days, but the past 2 weeks we've made 6 hires, all important positions at the school. So feel really good about that. And those folks have started, minus 2 folks who will start this coming week. And so with those hires, we still have 3 key vacancies. We've got a high school science teacher vacancy open. We've got a math learning specialist position open at the middle school, and a middle school ELA position. So there are interviews happening for the ELA position this week. And then the other positions, the pipeline is quite dry. And so we're filling those internally right now. So that's staffing. Any questions there, or any questions with regard to vaccinations? I'll move us down then. We had all students in grades 6 through 12 completing the first interim assessment last week going into this week. And so we'll have updates on that data next month. It feels good to have that data, and look forward to sharing it out. On the climate front of things, we've tried to maintain school as was, right? And so lots of events kind of happening over the past month, festive events from Spirit Week to a few others. We also have administered some surveys to our stakeholders, and then conducted a focus group with staff to get more of a sense of, all right, what's going well, where are there challenges, where can we make smart decisions that promote sustainability among team and high morale among team. So those are in the mix at this point in time. And then other things here, we had have both a student election at the high school going on, and we had some seniors voting for the first time. So politics in the mix. And then we will very likely have a new member joining us officially in the coming meeting with Lenny Singletary joining the board. His materials were submitted to state last week, and expect to hear from state this week with approval. So those are some updates on headlines over the past month. If I skipped over anything, is there anything you want to discuss? Anyone want to put forth a question or insight here? Cool. I'll mention with regard to daily attendance, the range has been 86 to 91%. I've got a dashboard with some good data there too, but I think we have noticed that when there's a positive case at school, it does adversely impact attendance for a day or two. And those are for students who perhaps are quarantining and then not reporting to school, or those students whose families are just a little cautious about kind of getting back in the mix. Hearing about a positive case can be unsettling for families. And so in some cases, families have kept kids home for another day or two and not in school. So we have seen that over the past month. And
Josh, you're not doing remote for kids who are quarantining, right? They're just fully out?
We are at the middle school. It's sort of like if there's a quarantine, we had 2 cases of this in the 7th grade. For those students who are home, and it was by section, they're experiencing kind of a Zoom in the room kind of thing, where we are having live instruction for a vast majority of our kids who are at school. And then in addition to that, there are kids learning from home. At the high school, it's a little more complex. And so we are offering the availability for students to Zoom in, but there isn't the same sort of like dialogue directly going on. And then we are taping classes and then making them available to students as well.
So if you have somebody quarantining and doing Zoom in a room, do you count them as present or you count them as absent?
Yeah, and we're kind of noting that differential, but yes.
Sorry, which one?
They're counted as present, but we're also like noting that this is a case in which they're home and taking part in school.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Yeah.
For binary data reported to the state, that would be counted as present, but we count it as present virtually.
And so I think with that, the sort of fix has been like just continuing to sharpen our communication. Like this is new terrain for our school. The whole idea of like shutting off some of the school to quarantine, and like it's complex to then get everything airtight so that like kids are experiencing the very best class period virtually as possible. So I think it's been new to us. So like sharpening communication, sharpening our systems is something that I think we've been experiencing and developing. So as that happens, I think this becomes more natural. Hopefully it's not a common occurrence, but yeah. And I guess I should say 4 cases over the past 2 months for 500 and something students is pretty low. So while I don't have data on the city overall, anecdotally, I do know of staff members who have kids in schools where like the impact of COVID cases, there's been more of them and it's had more of an impact on kids being at home. Okay, I think those are the main headlines I want to bring up coming from the dashboard. I'm not the dashboard, from the school lead report. So any other questions that folks would want to bring forward? We'll probably touch on some of the other items that are in this report during other parts of the meeting tonight. Okay. So I'll kick us over to dashboard now. And I guess what I'll do is I'll share my screen there.
Is this just came out, Josh? In
What's
an
that?
email?
The dashboard?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Just looking at the email. Okay.
About 20 minutes
Make
ago.
sure.
And then
Check your email if you haven't already.
Yeah. All right. And there's some updates here too. I wanna zoom in on 7 areas of school as reflected in these various dashboard tables. So first, let's go to student enrollment. So what you see here is you see our likely enrollment, which is what we believe to be the case, which is somewhat conservative. We end up then kind of like, if there's a student that we know isn't going to be enrolling in our school but still on roster, we don't include them here. That would be the ATS enrollment. So you'll see a difference of 538, which is kind of what's programmed into our school via the DOE, and then what we feel is a more accurate depiction of our enrollment at 520. And the color coding here by grade represents kind of how close we are to full utilization, having 100% of our seats assumed by grade. And so green in grades 9, 10, and 11, you'll see we're beyond our target enrollment in those grades. In 6th grade and 8th grade, we're within 5 percentage points of being at full enrollment in those grades. You'll note in 6th grade, we've often kind of faced challenges, and so this has been a strong year recruitment wise, and we've got a full 6th grade, which is awesome. 7th grade, there's a bit of a divot. We've got 70 kids. We've got room for probably 75 now. I mentioned to members of the AFC on Friday that we consolidated the 7th grade from 4 sections to 3 sections, partly because of staff reasons and partly because our enrollment was small enough there where we could do so without having too big a series of class sizes. So that was a move. The trade-off is that it limits our ability to kind of backfill in that grade, but we weren't getting much action there. So we felt like it was the best move. And then in 12th grade, we typically don't backfill in the 12th grade. It's too close to graduation. And it takes time to kind of like get involved in school and experience the full kit and caboodle. So overall, that's generally what's going on. It produces a target unlikely enrollment of 520 where we're budgeted at 532. So we are 12 down right now. There's some moves that Chris and team are making to up that. I feel good about them. 7 moves specifically, but the kind of work they're doing right now to backfill. And I should mention that our manager of student recruitment at the middle school has been out for the past 2 months because of parental leave. He's now back in the mix as of this week. So it's just like, we just doubled our team. So it feels good to have more firepower in the mix there. But the work is really like going hard on social media and like connecting with people via Facebook, etc., and then following up immediately to gauge interest. That's one, and that's probably been our biggest move. We are sending text messages to our current families with referrals and offering some incentives if they introduce us to families. That's 2. 3, we are mentioning that we do have seats available to our feeder schools who perhaps have alums who are not happy in their current school and might be interested in moving on. So Chris and Cooler both contacting those schools. Fourth, there's a Welcome Family Center in Brooklyn. If someone moves into town, they're looking for a school, they typically go to that Welcome Center. And so it's making sure that we're on their radar is a next move. And we've had kids enrolled with that before in the past, so we'll continue with that. And a couple of others. So I'll kind of leave it off there. But there are actions taking place to backfill. And so that's the present standing. Any questions there?
Just on high school enrollment,
Yeah.
do you expect that this pattern is probably our consistent pattern in terms of roughly 10 kids a grade from 9th to 12th?
Yeah, attrition's typically about I think it's about 5%, 5 to 10%, like in general. So yeah, I think that's been the way in which we've kind of controlled or planned ahead for this with that sort of estimation in mind, knowing it's not always playing out that way, but
How is it getting to that sort of low 80s and mid 70s number in 10th and 11th? Is that, or sorry, 9th and 10th, is that easy with the high school, or is that?
If you remember, we had issues with our capacity because we had our two cohorts that have graduated were significantly larger. And so we had capacity constraints. And so we could only enroll a certain number of students in the 9th grade last year who are now in 10th grade. And then the year before for those students who were in 11th grade. Or no, I'm sorry. Circle back.
You mean going from 8th to 9th?
Yeah.
We're going from middle school to high school.
Yeah. So like when we moved when we were in Brownsville, moving to the high school, we just had some limitations with regard to numbers, and we backfilled as much as we could, but that's where we ended up. So,
but I just mean like going into this year, was it, I can't remember. Was it tough to get to the 80 number in 9th grade and the 70 number in 10th grade? Or is that like
roll 120 kids in the 9th grade?
There's wait lists and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So Williamsburg does not feel like you're having to sort of market and advertise for kids.
It's kids are coming from all over too. So like it isn't, we probably have slightly more students from Williamsburg applying because we're local now, but in high school kids are coming from all over. So there's a wider net, and I think there's less competition. There are just fewer charter high schools. So that is enrollment. I'm going to move us forward to table 3 with some other updates. Just student attrition right now. So this is in the green. Thus far, we've had 8 students from the 6th of October to last week leave our school for various reasons. I look back at 2019 data as of November, and we were at 19 students leaving at that point in time. So we're experiencing fewer or less attrition, and that wasn't an issue in 2019 either. So this feels good. Target here overall is that no more than 10% of our kids leave over the course of the year, excluding moving to other cities or places. I'm going to move us forward to table 5. Student attendance. I guess I mentioned this earlier. What you'll note here is we had 2 positive cases in the 7th grade this past month, and you'll see it was the only grade that experienced a decrease in kind of cumulative average daily attendance. So just to reinforce that, like when we are having a positive case, it does have a negative impact on attendance. Let's see, if I were to go back in time to November of 2019, overall attendance was 93%. So I think, we've got a lower attendance rate on average as of November than we did 2 years ago when things were very normal. And I think a lot of this is also due to like, if there's a symptom, students are staying at home more so than they would have perhaps in the past, because that's what we're recommending and that's what's been recommended to us. So we are likely to kind of take more of a hit with regard to attendance this year. The goal here for this year was 92%. If we hit 90%, I feel good about that. Again, given the scene, given the circumstances. Moving us forward to all the way down now, table 13. And table 13 is a fun one. It just offers kind of like where are we with student participation. It's good to just have a feel for this, like how many kids are engaged in stuff other than kind of like the 7 classes of the day. I'm looking at just athletics here. And so for the fall, we've got more students participating in fall sports than we had back in November of 2019. And so that's great. So I think 2019, it was more of, I don't have the exact percentages here, but it was something lower than where we are now. No, it was 20% versus 29%. So that feels great. And so more teams, more kids playing. With regard to Sped Compliance in table 14 right now, I feel good about this. This is all in the green. I think what I'll just note here is like, we've got strong oversight and supervision of compliance at both sites as reflected by the notes coming from the folks who manage this. And so at the middle school, for example, 96% of our kids have IEPs that are up to date. 90% are experiencing a full educational experience as aligned to their IEP, and 100% of kids are experiencing at least a partial or full, meaning we're giving them the best services we have given what's on their IEP, and they're opting to stay at our school even if it doesn't exactly match, or we're in process of making that an exact match. So you'll see here that Liviane has offered like, hey, we've got 2 students who have IEP meetings coming up on the 3rd, and then we've got a student who has a special program that we don't offer. They're now experiencing this as an alternative. So again, I feel good about this portion of school. So just want to highlight that. We typically do that 2 or 3 times a year. And so here is an update. Finally, a new table, table 15. But before I go, are there any questions with regard to Sped Compliance? Cool. Last table then, table 15, COVID vaccinations. This is a newbie. And I mentioned this earlier. We have more vaccinations that have been verified over the past month than what we had the month before. So there's been an uptick there. And we have kind of like data files, like confirmation of those. And so you'll see in the 9th grade right now, 44% of our students are vaccinated with proof. And that ranges. 6th grade, most of our kids are under the age of 12, so they're now going to be experiencing the availability of a vaccination, and so we expect for there to be an uptick there. We'd love to have, on average, overall, grades 6 through 12, a rate of 40%. That's kind of like a near-term goal for us, and so we hope to see 6th grade pick up as well as some of the other grades pick up as time goes on. And so we continue to kind of encourage vaccinations weekly in our postings, et cetera. Obviously, if there's a positive case, we're promoting vaccinations so that kids, if they're feeling well, are able to come back to school sooner. And the DOE, we have a vaccination site on Friday at our middle school for kids to get vaccinated if they choose to. So,
yeah, I was going to say, are there other things you could be doing to encourage? Because I don't think kids are going to be paying a lot of attention to newsletters and stuff like that. But
yeah, I think the quarantining thing is real. Like that's where we've seen some upticks at the high school. And so families want their kids at school as long as they feel their kids are going to be safe at school.
yeah, but that's not a great strategy of like, let's wait till we have a few cases and it'll scare everybody into getting vaccinated.
No, it's experiential. It's just what we've seen.
Yeah.
We've in prior meetings over the past couple of months have talked about incentives. And I think this team felt that wasn't the best approach because it seems disingenuous. We also, in our athletic programs, in order to play certain sports, high contact sports, kids must be vaccinated. And so a sport like basketball, which is highly popular at our school, does require full vaccination. And so I assume with the season starting that more students will get vaccinated as a result of that. And I'm seeing some of that. And so that's also being kind of like announced and posted. I've been in contact with the United Way and then with Brooklyn Hospital about possibilities for info sessions of some kind with families. So that's in process, but we haven't kind of like gone down that route of offering something in school for families and students that actively provide fact and science behind the benefits of vaccination.
Okay. I think it's worth continuing to think about because, even 40% is not super great.
Yeah. I haven't seen the city numbers overall. The last numbers I saw for Bed-Stuy, it was probably about a third of the population. And so it's pretty low in the community. It's probably increased since then. It's probably closer to 40% now or more.
Well, remember, there's a lot of mandates that have gone into effect recently for adults.
That's right.
It's got to have ticked up somewhat, but I don't know the numbers either.
So that's the latest from school as far as indicators go in dashboard. And
Okay, any other questions? If not, let's just keep going, Josh.
keep chugging. All right, we're next going to move into strategic planning for tonight. And I want to go back to a topic of discussion with the SLC. That was, I think, a good discussion coming out of last month's meeting with the board too. So bear with me for 1 second.
Can I ask one just quick question? I hate to take us off track, but if when the new mayor comes in, depending on the stuff about the masks, getting rid of masks, not keeping masks, just curious if you started to give any thought to that.
Yeah, I heard that on NPR today on the way home. So I think what I heard that the mayor is perhaps open, or certainly more open, to requiring vaccinations than our current mayor. So that was one bullet point. And then the other bullet point, which was he would be open to having stakeholders in schools not wear masks if it was something that the science came out and said was okay, which is a pretty safe comment. So I think our position has been, we will do what's required of us by the state and city and authorizers, and then in the absence of that, we would follow CDC guidance. So let's see here. All right, screen shared. We had a rich discussion on STAR data and kind of where things are last month. And if you remember, like, the data wasn't like promising. Like, we've got a good number of students who are behind with regard to reading and math, some significantly so, lots of variation across the board. And so we dug into that. And I think within that conversation, there was talk of like, hey, what sort of like intensive moves are we making as a school to sort of like see improvements in growth and achievement? And so I wanted to double back with that today, and did so last Wednesday with the SLC because it's an important question and one that should be answered. And I do think that over the past 6 to 12 months, we've made some pretty significant moves in this direction aggressively to sort of see accelerated increases in student achievement and then growth. So here they are. Summarized. So I've divided kind of like these moves into 4 buckets. Like, first, people and talent, which to me is like the main bread and butter of a school in any sort of service field. Second are like the tools that those people are using and the systems. Third, that they're working within. And finally, the structures that are kind of at play as people sort of engage with kids in school, engage with each other in school, and engage in their own development in school. And so with people, I think one of the new moves that we've made this past year is the creation of a new position at the school, a chief academic officer, Melissa being that person that is keeping an eye very directly on growth and achievement at school. And in doing so, I think for us in year 9, in a 6-12 fashion, where we just haven't had that luxury because we've grown really fast over the past 7 years, and have been operating perhaps not completely coherently across sites. And I'm thinking about kids and our desire for them to experience something very seamless and coherent, grades 6 through 12, having a position that kind of like directs and supervises that is important. And so we talked about this as a board last spring, and I'm going to go back to that slide where I think the other piece here was just, we just added firepower. Like, this was sort of my role as of last year. And in having Melissa in this role, there are some elements to what were my roles and responsibilities that are now shared and now given much more attention to. And so those are in yellow here, from leading to establish and achieving annual school-wide goals, to ensuring coherence and alignment to our mission, 612, to training, supporting, supervising, and evaluating leaders, teachers, staff, et cetera, to then also directing and supervising like human capital development. And that includes hiring, onboarding, training, supervision, evaluation, promotion, and termination. So all that's there. And Melissa kind of, this is a transition year for us as we also onboard 2 new principals to the mix. So we're sharing in this year, but like this bodes well for school and for accelerating student growth, again, grades 6 through 12. So that in the end, just in kind of making sure that we understand what this leads to, it's going to lead to more students graduating from high school with more skills, with more doors open, having more options post-secondarily, and therefore, because they're more skilled, persisting through that, and then graduating and then having more opportunities professionally. So that's what this all leads to, going back to mission of empowerment and fulfilled lives. So going back here, in addition to people, there are a couple of other people shifts that we've made. At the middle school, our co-principal of teaching and learning is a humanities expert in ELA and in reading, and has played similar roles at our school in those areas. So she's well-versed in them. We brought on a principal from another school who was at a school that like has done good things for kids in middle school and elementary school around proficiency and stuff. And so she's our new ELA chair at the middle school. And so some good talent kind of in the mix. We've expanded our reading intervention program by 50%. We have a lead reading interventionist at the middle school, and we have another reading interventionist in the mix. And we've piloted and expanded the use of math interventions at the school. We have a person designated for that this year, first time we've had that. And so kids receiving support in math, those that need it most, now have people who are responsible for that. And then we've got a piloting of a SPED chair position at our school, where that person is responsible for training and developing learning specialists, which we haven't had in the past. We've had content people sort of doing that work in addition to working with content specialists. So some good moves here at my end in thinking about, all right, do we have the people on the bus that is required to increase growth and achievement in our school? In terms of tools, we've been introduced to some new stuff just because of what we've experienced for the past year and a half tech-wise. And so there's some good stuff out there that allow for us to, in pretty easy ways, measure growth over the near term. And so we got a dose of that last month with STAR data, which both assesses reading and math, grades 6, 12. We have that data from the spring. We have it in the fall now, and we'll have it again in the spring to assess growth over the course of the year. And so there's a host of other programs that we're using at the school within various interventions to monitor and promote growth. So those are the tools at play. And then within our systems, I think right now we're in a place where we've got some of these new people in play, we've got the tools in play. And so a current kind of area of progress for us and process is like, are we now operating in a way that is smart, efficient, and productive, and demonstrably effective in promoting growth among those kids that need it most? And so that's being built out as we kind of experience this now. And then finally, structures. We talked about this before, and I'll mention it, and we can talk about it perhaps during the executive session if folks would like to. But I am continuing to actively explore the possibility of a downward expansion. Actively explore doesn't mean we're signing anything, but I want to see sort of what's out there. And a lot of that has to do with just like, is there a demand for this in our community? And so have some early data on what that looks like and what it would entail. And I think the headline here is that, there are lots of charters and lots of schools in central Brooklyn right now. And so demand isn't as high as it was perhaps in comparison to when we opened, but there may be a couple of pathways here which are worth exploring further. So I'll end this by saying that there are folks who I've spoken with who have seen our kind of growth before, middle school, high school, then to elementary school, who believe that perhaps the most powerful move a school could take in our seat, in our position, would be to expand downwards so that our students are experiencing our education grades K-5 and coming into our school at a level that on average isn't 2 years below where perhaps they are when they come in now. So I think it deserves to be on the table of things worth exploring. Let me stop there and kind of get a sense from people. This is very strategic. And so what comes to mind as you kind of hear some of these power moves in my mind and considerations?
When you say there's a lot of charters in central Brooklyn, are you including K-5 charters, new charters that weren't there when the school started?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there's been two things. There have been more schools that have popped up, and then there are fewer kids.
Okay.
Just, I like the idea, certainly in theory and maybe even practice. This has sort of been in the more talked about topic at the classical board.
Yeah.
But sorry, not one that I've been super round into, but I think it is more complicated from a governance. Like, I don't think it's so easy to extend our charter down. I think it's about you've to merge with other schools, and certain changes don't require approval and certain changes do. And like, I think in general, I mean, maybe it'll change under the new administration, but previously they weren't giving new charters out. So again, I'm not against the theory, but I would just sort of keep the difficulty in mind as you expend efforts.
Yeah, I'll distinguish. So for us, if we were to go out and say, hey, wouldn't it be a great idea to open up another middle school? First, I would say, no, not a good idea. Let's not do that. But like, if that were the case, we would have to then get another charter. If we're extending downward, we can do this within the same charter. It's just a material revision to our existing charter. In the same way that we expanded up from grade 6-10 to then grade 6-12, it's just in the reverse order. So it would be providing an amendment in our charter renewal this coming year. Now, something you mentioned a moment ago, Jake, right now, like the recommendation coming from folks at the Charter Center, for example, is like, hey, because of like the demand perhaps not being as evident based on kind of the data we have at hand, a path that people have been exploring more so is like this idea of like a merger with a school that perhaps is interested in expanding upward but can't do so, and thinking about a partnership there. And there are a few configurations for that. One being like a straight up merger. One of the schools dissolves and picks up. And there's a whole lot of like baggage, I think, with that that makes it kind of scary. There's also like a partnership, a formal partnership where there needs to be an MOU in effect. And like, here are the ways in which we partner. And we're still two separate schools operating with two separate boards, but like, here's the way in which we create a bit of a pipeline softly across sites. And then there's like more informal kinds of partnerships that can exist that don't even require an MOU. But that's my understanding based on a quick call that Michelle Roy Gaines had with the Charter Center a few weeks ago, just to explore this.
I think there's also just sort of like a charter by expansion of board and like, I think basically our board could just sort of like become their board. And if you don't change the names and stuff like that, you can maybe get away with it without needing approvals. But anyway,
Yeah.
That's probably not worth spending a whole bunch of time.
Yeah. So again, just to kind of jump back, I wanted to address like there have like over the past 6 to 12 months, there have been some structural moves, org chart wise and otherwise, that I think put us in a good position to sort of see things through and experience accelerated growth and achievement. And so it's now about seeing these things in action in the best of ways. So that's the update with regard to strategy this month.
Okay, thanks. Should we go to ASC?
Yes. And so I think we can kick things off with Alex just jumped on. Hey, Alex.
Hi,
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. So I think what we're going to do tonight, there are two items I think within the AFC agenda, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mario and Jeanette and Jim. But I think we'll provide kind of a monthly update with regard to where things are as of the end of September. And then I think we can move into just providing an update on the 403B plan for employees and kind of where we are. we're going to not bring this up for approval tonight because there's a little more legwork we want to take on. But we want to tell you where we are with things and get others kind of up to speed, and then maybe think about next steps from there. So I see those two priorities for AFC. Do others agree?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Cool. So Alex, I'll kick it over to you, and I'm going to unshare my screen. Do you want to share anything tonight?
That is up to the group. I can share the report if you guys have it. I can just do the really brief update, whatever folks are most comfortable with.
Jim, your call.
Yeah, why don't you throw up the summary page so we all see it?
Yep. Let's see.
I don't know what it's called. Financial financial report. Yeah.
And let me know if you have screen sharing capacities, Alex.
I do not at this moment.
Chris Dosher, if you're in the
It's okay.
Okay.
We all have it. We can follow along.
Okay.
I'm just working off the one that's it's number 3. The title is 3 Unity Monthly Financial.
Yes. Yep. So that's the current financial report. It's a very brief update. I know that you guys have already spoken about the enrollment variance. So we are seeing a budget variance attributed to enrollment. As of this reporting month, we were reporting about 521 students. From what I just saw from Josh, we may be reporting 520 next month, or that may be going up based on the efforts for recruitment. All of the metrics, all the SED benchmarks are healthy, other than the enrollment. That's the only thing that we've been talking about. If we're looking at that, it's about a $315,000 variance. But mixed into this is also all of the COVID grants and, of course, the PPP loan. So when we're looking at the year-to-date net income, as of the end of September, so the end of the first quarter, we are seeing net income of about $1.8 million. And that is compared to budget of 647, because we were not folding in the PPP loan and some of these other COVID grants when we were building out the budget. If we remove the PPP and any COVID related grants and the direct expenses that we have been showing, our net income after that adjustment is about $503,000 compared to the $647,000 per budget, which is more consistent with what we would be seeing with a decline in enrollment to budget. Cash flow is still healthy. We will continue to incur expenses, but we continue to have opportunities with these grants. So the PPP loan is supporting a lot of the additional staffing that we took on. And then things like the COVID testing, the parking lot lease, those will be covered by the COVID grants available to us.
Jim, Jeanette, Marion, anything you'd add?
I don't think so. I mean, as usual, things are largely getting driven by enrollment. And then this year we have to deal with the COVID related things and identify which of them are non-recurring and over what period. But I think this look is helpful.
Cool. All right. So with that update, maybe we now move to the latest thinking on updating our 403B plan. And I'll bring that up for us because I do have it open now. All right. And so I think that the thing to do here is to talk a bit about the why here, the what and why, and then move into some of the analysis work and then kind of where we currently are. But Chris and Alex have both done a good job over the past several months of collecting information on various options for providing some kind of match to employees in comparison to what other schools across the city are offering. And so some of the analysis is here. I think the headline here is that a vast majority of schools offer some sort of matching, and that's 78%. And then this table here in front of us provides what the match is and what percentage is being provided. And so the most common tends to be 3%. where within this charter school survey of the 108 schools surveyed, about a quarter of them offer that. And so in being competitive, and it is competitive right now, and also in kind of setting our staff up who commit a lot to our school, and we want for our best folks to be staying with us. We want to take care of them. And so this is one way of doing so. And I found that over time, this has become more important to people, both as our founding staff get a bit older and have continued to work at the school, have families, et cetera. And then just more generally, we're just kind of behind the curve here with regard to what we're offering in comparison to what others are offering. And so there's a strategic interest in doing this. So I think I will pause there and move things forward with, let's see, Chris or Alex, you want to take it from here with regard to kind of what we found and what we're proposing as of now?
Sure. Are you thinking more in terms of like the vesting schedules, what I found within the past 2 days, Josh?
No, even just go back to Friday, catch everyone up to speed with Friday, and then we'll kind of introduce the vesting stuff from there.
Oh, okay. Alex, actually, if you could take it from the next part, that'd be great. She might have stepped away. Okay, I will take it. Oh, no,
No, I'm good. So, in compiling the research, we're looking at what other charter schools are doing, and there will be a discussion about some of those details. But kind of at a high level, the first step was to frame out what this would look like from a cost standpoint. We are hoping to implement this potentially January 1st, so it will have an impact on this year's budget, which would be an unbudgeted expense. So from January until June, it's going to hit the current budget. And then we would realize a full annual encumbrance next year. So we wanted to look at the two options that we initially discussed, a 2% match or a 3% match. And we've roughed out the figures here. So that would be the maximum. These assumptions are, that every eligible employee is going to participate. So we would be required to match all salaries, and that no one who is currently on payroll would leave. Now, obviously, those are not likely to be realized, but without making it much more complicated, this was kind of the easiest way to nail down the figures. So you'll see, year one is not a huge impact because we are only talking about 6 months of the year. And then gradually it's going to increase because as salaries increase over time, the match is going to increase as staff salaries. So by the end of year 5 or so, the annual contribution would be significantly more than year one. But a lot of this, it's still unknown. We have a fairly low participation in the 403B presently. So we did look at what would this look like if only the current participants participated. That's the 28%. And then 68% is the industry average. 80% and 100% we put just because we thought perhaps people would land somewhere between there.
And so what we're trying to do is sort of be as competitive as we can be while also being sort of reasonable about our exposure and what we feel we can commit to at this time. I think right now, when someone asks me when interviewing for a job and we're offer them a position, do we match? I have to say no. And so what we're thinking here is what can we afford so that the answer is yes, so that we're able to be competitive with some of the other schools that are offering folks something and be enticing to these people. So this analysis is just a reflection of that.
Presumably in your sort of study of competitiveness with other schools, you're looking at obviously not just the retirement benefits, but overall compensation. Do you feel like, obviously it's a complicated equation and all that, but just sort of curious if you got a little gloss there.
Yeah, so we are competitive at the sort of base angle among charters. Overall, we are competitive with the DOE early on in one's career. We are not competitive with them after perhaps year 10 and not competitive with them on the benefits front. We've also, I think what's been helpful is we have done a bit of a deeper dive here, and we have reached out to other schools to figure out where they're at with regard to matching, investing, et cetera. And so For some of the network schools that we compete against that are high performing, we find that what is typical is some sort of vesting period, which could be anywhere from 18 months to a few years. And then with regard to match, it typically is between 3 and 5%.
Doesn't the administrator have good data on vesting schedules for, similar schools?
I think the data we have now is probably better than what the administrator might put forth. I don't think they work with a whole host of charters. But I think with our network, we were able to get 5 or 6 data points of schools that we know well and that in some cases our folks have worked at. So that might be the best data we have, Jim.
That's strange because the administrator is in charge of monitoring the vesting. It's odd that they wouldn't have the data.
Yeah.
But
Chris and Alex, is that accurate? I want to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn.
No, you're accurate. For what I know, he doesn't have just a ton of charter school clients. It seems like a lot of the charter school clients are spread among different brokers, different providers, so that he doesn't actually have a ton of charter school clients. But I was able to reach out to other charter school networks and colleagues at Unity who were at other schools recently. So I'm putting together a table of vesting schedules for other charter school networks.
okay, good. I guess the only feedback I get, and we'll look at that for the next meeting. Is that right? Or finalize it in the committee or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess, if other schools are, I think we just need to be competitive here. And we need to, if we're going to do this, let's not stray too far from what others are doing if we're competing for the right people. So if everybody's at 3%, let's not do 1% or 5%, let's just keep it down the fairway, assuming we can afford it. Let's look at that. And then, with the vesting, I think, and it would be really interesting. Do you have, Chris, and the data you've had from other schools with the matches, do you have participation numbers? Did they provide that to you?
No, that I don't know, because typically I'm asking like teachers at those other schools, like, what's the plan at your school? So they don't know how many people at their school are participating.
Got it. Okay. Well, that's good because
Chris's data below the table shows what the average participation in the K-12 at 68%.
That I was able to get from Brad.
Yeah, and to Jake's, I think it's worth asking the administrator if they have access to sources of data that are something other than their own clients. There might be industry stuff that they have access to. I also, to Jake's earlier point, would be interested in knowing the total comp package at those other schools that we're going to be looking at, right? Because they're matching investing tells me one data point, but I don't know if their salaries and other benefits are lower or higher. And I think that might be difficult to assess, but getting a sense of that because it might be weighing things differently. And so I don't want to be over reliant on one part of their benefits program if I don't understand the picture.
Makes sense.
So, what would that be? I am feeling some urgency here as we begin to move into hiring season for the coming year, and just based on dialogue with members of the team, I'm bracing for a year in which it's going to be very competitive. We may lose some people if we don't fire this up. So I think we should do the very best research we can with a time frame intact. And the big question is like paying for this. And I have done that work thus far, which is why I want to be somewhat, Jim, I hear you on being competitive. And I think you said this, be competitive while being able to pay for it. Because this is our first time doing this, I do want to perhaps take a measured first step, and we can always adjust upward if we feel like we're in a good place to do so in the future. But I think the first move in my mind is being able to say, team, we are initiating a matching program in the coming year. This is what it looks like. This is how you take part. This is what it means for you in the long term. And then prospective team member, we do match. This is what it looks like in the long term. I think this is This is critical in my mind.
Just, I know I'm not in the AFC, but I'll just add one thing from my other life is I think when you're putting these in place, you should not only consider the near-term problem, which is sort of recruiting people in and getting them sort of invested in Unity for the long term, but also the long-term problem, which is people getting too comfortable and not wanting to leave. And I think so that's why pensions were originally established. Just that's why they were defined benefit, because it was sort of like accrue your years and then you get to retire and you don't give up that much savings. And so you create room for the next set of teachers and civil servants and stuff like that. So I'd consider adding some component like that at the back end too.
Wait, what does it look like that you're suggesting?
I haven't seen it as much with the defined contribution plans, but it's something that like I've seen people toying around with at the margins, where at some point when you hit an age, you can't, anyway, at some point what you've accrued starts going down if you stay in the if you stay in the position, if you stay in your job past a certain age or something like that.
I don't know. It's a qualified plan, so I don't know that we can do that under ERISA.
Got it. Okay.
We can't basically just discriminate outside of providing vesting within the first few years of employment generally.
Got it. Okay.
So I think Chris and Alex, what do you, I know there's a call with Brad tomorrow. What do you sort of see as next steps to getting to a place where like, hey, we feel confident that this is the plan that is ideal given our circumstances and resources?
I would say, look, in regards to Marion's point, looking at this compared to a compensation survey of other schools, so like taking the full picture into account and finalizing the chart as far as the vesting schedules for other schools. So making sure we are offering that competitive package in line with other schools, and then having the AFC, having it on the AFC agenda for next month, ideally, potentially for a board vote next month.
Okay.
Yeah,
If it
and
makes
I
sense,
think,
we could do a pre-call before the AFC call if it's helpful to sort of make sure that things are really ready at the AFC level, so we're not holding it up another month.
Sounds good. I appreciate
that. Oh, in sync.
yeah, and I just say on the third page here, you go into vesting, but really, I think you need to dig into that. These are, you have a 1-year cliff, a 2-year cliff, and then did you get these options from the provider in terms of what people are doing with respect
When you
to
say
vesting?
options for the provider,
Idea 1, idea 2, idea 3. Did those come from our provider, the benefits provider, as things that people are doing? Because I haven't really seen these. Typically, it's nothing for year
further
one,
down,
and then
Josh.
it's 20%
Sorry.
or 25% over a period of time for the next several years. 1-year cliff, if they start vesting year one, that's not. Where did idea 1, 2, and 3 come from?
Since this document, this is from the 1st of November. We've actually have a more updated document with comparing it to other schools, so you can ignore that for now.
Okay, good. Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Okay, cool. So I think we've got some next steps for the next month, and then some ability to communicate offline when it's helpful. I think that's it for the AFC, unless members have something to add.
Well, I mean, Josh, do you want to give a sense of how you're planning to pay for this?
Yeah, so I think, look, this is mostly staffing in my mind. 80% of our budget goes to staffing, and so we would make room for this. And so that to me is where it's rooted. We talked on Friday about perhaps some ways in which there is some cost savings here. It wouldn't fully be cost saved, but partially in the form of less in recruitment, less in development work, less in curriculum development work. And I've identified the line items where we perhaps could see some savings there. But I think the move here is to have this completely embedded within staffing and compensation.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we could probably move forward to next committee report, which is the DFC. And so I can provide some headlines here, and then Sal and Jake and Jim can offer some nuances here. But we did reconvene with the developer and his contractor last week. This is all in the leader report, by the way. And I think we talked about the last iteration of a lease amendment that we talked through last spring. And so this was a continuation of that. I would call the conversation productive for the most part, and that like parties seem to be in line on the same page, although there are some complexities with what this expansion would be in adding one more floor to our existing high school. And so the ask right now of the developer is to provide us with a construction timeline with milestones and amendments to the draft lease that we sent to him some time ago. And so he's promised to have that back to us. And so that was as of yesterday. So my sense is we'll have more to report out with regard to details and complexities and realness of all this in the coming month. Sal, Jake, Jim, anything else you'd add?
I don't think there's much to add right now.
Yeah. And I think also in the school report, from a facility standpoint, the trailers are a go now, and so we expect delivery there to be late December. And so I'm working with LOSI in seeing that go smoothly, and then also with the trailer company, and there's a 5-week or so window for fabrication and delivery. So that would be the next step. But if this all goes rather smoothly, we would have 3 spaces in the parking lot next to our building that would be for us to use for 12 months.
Is it through the end of the school year or 12 months?
Well, it would be 12 months from the delivery. And so in speaking with the distributor, they're unable to do a shorter period than 12 months. It just doesn't work for them or into their model. And so this is, I think, the best we could get in thinking about the possibility of an expansion where next year we wouldn't have any additional space. This might not be a bad option for us through December, and perhaps even extend it for the year if we felt like that was best. So some good action and more to report next month.
Great. Okay, should we move on to ECPC?
Yeah, I think the thing to report out there is we spent a good portion of our time on Tuesday of last week talking about the board visit and in debriefing on that. So I want to pull up something now that I think allows for us in a few minutes time to formally debrief on that as a group. We thought that'd be a good use of people's time tonight. So let me open that up. Give me 1 second. Okay, here we are. So I guess I just begin. It was really great to have a number of you guys attend our middle school and high school this month. Just good to be back in the mix after not being in school for some time. And I know our team appreciated having you there. Our kids appreciated the focus group discussion at the high school a great deal. They were really nervous initially, and they're like, "Hey, who are these folks? What are they about?" And we got right into it with that discussion. So I think they felt both appreciated, felt important. These are all good things, and so I just want to thank folks for being there to cheerlead, champion Norm, and like. I think as Sal said, it just is really valuable to see and be in the school in kind of like then having that weigh in and inform these discussions on a monthly Tuesday call. So thank y'all. What we did as a part of our debrief is used a quick protocol in start, stop, and continue, which is just like, hey, based on the visit, we're going to do this again in the spring and look forward to it. Based on the experience of those who took part, what would you start to do that perhaps you didn't experience the first time around with this visit this month? What would you stop doing? What perhaps wasn't as valuable? And then what would you continue doing? And so what you see here in front of you are Sal's sort of reflections on time in the building. And so I guess I'd open it up to team here and say, looking at Sal's list, is there anything you'd want to add to what we should start doing in making these visits even more powerful? That Sal has not listed, or what would you underline, or perhaps what would you challenge?
I guess I'll underline that I think it's nicer to be in the classes longer rather than rotating so quickly. And I also sort of agree that I wasn't there for the student panel, or I guess I was there for a panel of one, but I enjoyed that the middle school just getting a little direct chance to interact with some of the kids.
All right. That was also enjoyable for me to see, Jake. Brought me back to like the days when you were mentoring.
Felt good. I learned about Roblox.
Cool. So just a perspective on having more time in classes. Other things coming from team.
I agree with both Sal and Jake. I think more time in class. Don't need to meet after every class and debrief on every class. You can do that at the very end. I thought the student thing was good as well.
Cool.
So yeah.
Cool. Just in moving this forward, anything you guys would stop or continue doing beyond what's been said?
From the perspective of somebody who couldn't make it, for me, it's not super great to have it back to back, the 2 days, or like so close in time, because it's like if you got to make a morning to do it or half a morning, it's hard to do twice in 1 week.
Yeah. Cool. That's awesome. Appreciate that.
Just to follow up on what Marianne said, Josh, is your intention to do it back to back just to get a handful of people at either or would your preference is to have folks come both mornings?
Transparently, it was a more open kind of week with regard to like competing things going on. And I think, for us, like, this is like, we want you to like experience it. And this does require like some work on our part to kind of make happen. We're not like trying to put on a performance for you, but it still requires some general communication and setup. And so doing that back to back is maybe a little easier because it's just like, all right, here's our focus over these 2 days or over these 2 mornings. But I don't feel strongly about it. If it's more helpful to space it out, we can do that.
How do I say this?
Oh, hey, Earl.
And I've been here and I try to make sure I say things that are of value, but our constituents and our customers are the school. So if it's an inconvenience for us, we need to be more amenable to the inconvenience than the teachers and or the students. And if it is more amenable for it to be back to back, then we need to look at probably prioritizing their convenience more so than ours.
Yeah, I think my only point is some people might not make it. And so.
I think that's fair, but the teachers in the school and ensuring that's it's almost it's an embrace disruption, but it's still a disruption. So I differ, Josh. If it's easier, then we will accommodate, or people can't make it. That's just what it is.
I think my stance here is that more the merrier. And so that to me is like what's most important. And it's second to like have it back to back or spatially. I think the bigger point you make here is just like that. I mean, I don't think we have a board in this way, but I think I have seen or experienced boards that will come into a school and like it's like a show and tell and a performance for them as opposed to them coming in and like, you know, fist pump, let's get you fired up. This work is really hard right now. We support you. Do your best work. We love this school. Like that kind of thing is really what provides energy. And so I think, or I take that point. I think that's a good thing to underline. And again, that was the experience I felt this past month in having members there. So I appreciate you guys coming with that. So we'll do it again, and we'll plan on doing it probably early spring to spread things out so that roundtables are also something in the mix, and it's not too close together where you guys are kind of like trying to figure out your busy schedules while also trying to see school.
I like I'm sorry. I like the idea of the teacher panel as well. That's a great idea.
Yeah. The chat, we wanted to do that, and then we just felt like it was just short on time. And so I want to think through what's the best way to do that, that offers you guys some pulse, which I think we did 2 years ago. I remember that session at the middle school. At the high school, we thought about it and then felt like it was just going to be too hard, particularly with some of the shortages in place right now. But I think
Also,
ideally it's
space for teachers, that transaction time of walking back and forth to WeWork. So we can think about remote options, or we'll have a little bit more space when you come back because we'll have those trailers. So it's definitely something we can put on our spring list.
Yeah, we could take a little small group of them out to lunch or something like that afterwards or something. I don't know. There's a way to do it.
You'll have hundreds of kids wanting to take part. Yeah. Free pizza. Okay, so we'll jump out from there, and I think we're back to committee reports and SLC. I think we dove into the two items that Jake and Jeanette thought we should jump into. Other discussion points. We talked about October school-wide goals and where things landed there across senior leadership. And then we talked a bit about what we're aiming for here in November. And those goals run the gamut from like things like enrollment to safety, to academics, to teaching and learning and coaching, to staff morale, to kind of hit on a few big ones. But for each of those sort of elements of school, we do have deliverables that we want to achieve. And within them, we've got actors in play, those who are managing them, those who are performing them, with kind of weekly touch points. And so it was kind of a lot of minutia, but I felt like the point was that like we've got some things intact as a school now that we haven't always had, that indicate that like we're goal driven and we're checking ourselves on it in ways that we haven't before, and there's some clarity about who does what. So that was the takeaway I hope that folks experienced. We also then talked about where we are with regard to instructional practice and our coaching of that practice. And we are keeping tabs on like here, for example, our 5 practices we would like for our entire staff to be proficient in over the course of the first 2 months of school. Okay, if that's the case, how many actually demonstrated that level of proficiency across that skill set? And then how many did not? And then as coaches and leaders, what are we doing to support and hold people to that so that our kids are experiencing it? And then once that's done, we move on to a new series of milestones. And so that was the other, I think, conversation happening on Wednesday among SLC. SLC folks, would you add anything?
Nope.
Cool. Back to you, Jim.
Sorry. Okay. Associate board. I don't see. Is there any news on that front?
Nope.
Okay. So let's move to the approving the minutes. I'm just sorry. I had one note here about a date. What, does anybody know what that might mean?
There may have been
Hold-
a correct date on the.
Oh, yeah, look at the first paragraph. I think that's what I was looking at.
Okay.
These are the October minutes. And it's got September in there. Is that right? Yeah. So if someone could just go through and make sure the dates are right in the minutes.
Yep.
That's all I had.
Chris, you got that?
I'll do that. Sorry.
Yep. Anybody else have any comments to the minutes? Okay. Okay, great. All in favor of approving? Thank you. Okay, moving on, and we're gonna table the other conversation.
Yep.
Public comment. I think we move on from there, and then Josh, anything you want to say before we move over to executive?
No, I think just that for the coming month, that'll be the December meeting. We'll be talking about interim assessment results and actions from there. We'll be talking about those surveys that we had families, students, and staff complete this month. And then we'll very likely have a new member of our board also in the mix. So those are a couple of headlines.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Thanks, everybody. And let's, Chris, let's end this meeting and move to executive session. If you could